Campsites in New Zealand. In my videos, I mention the top 10 holiday parks quite a lot. It is a franchise of holiday parks that are across New Zealand, featuring 48 different holiday parks. I realised we've been to 21 out of the 48 parks across New Zealand, and I want to tell you about the top 10 holiday parks. Hi, I'm Emily and welcome to my YouTube channel. I post every Friday about living, working and exploring New Zealand. We go on loads of adventures with our 3 and 4-year-old, making the most and living in this beautiful country that is Aotearoa, New Zealand. Not all top 10 holiday parks are the same. They have a classification rating of superior, premium and classic. I've really noticed, and I'll talk you through this, some of the differences around different classic campsites. But I have to say, if it's superior, it's usually superior. I can highly recommend them across the board, as I've been to some not so great campsites, which I'll do a video about soon, but they were not top 10. What I love about top 10 is generally they are rated and deliver a quality of service which you can expect from being in this same group of campsites. We're also top 10 members, which is really affordable membership and gives discounts on other things within New Zealand, including the Inter-Islander, which is the boat between the North and the South Islands. It is worth joining just for the discount that you get for going on the Inter-Islander. I recently got this map to talk you through the top 10 campsites. It's also really cool to have it in our caravan so the kids can look at it and we can tick the sites that we've been to. So let's get started. Now the very first one, all the way at the top, is Whatuwhiwhi on the Kaikoura Peninsula. We haven't been there before. We've made our way all the way up to Cape Tauranga and I do recommend that as a trip, but I haven't stayed at the top 10. That one is on our list to visit. However, we've been to the Russell one. We go to the Russell top 10 regularly. It is a superior campsite. We stayed there at New Year this year. There's a video which I'll put a link to here. And we have stayed every single year for the past 7 years, including staying previously on other trips to New Zealand. I can highly recommend it. It has a really good playground for the kids, a really good bounce area, but also it is walkable to town, to the beaches, to the ferries, to get out onto the Bay of Islands. We'll tend to park up with the car and the caravan and we won't go back in the car again for the next few days. It's really nice to have access to everything and what you need on site. Just across the way is the Paihia top 10, which is a classic. We haven't stayed here before, but we have been and checked it out. The reason we haven't stayed is our caravan is quite big. We are 9 meters long, so it's quite challenging to get our caravan into this site. So we drove down and had a look. It is on the water, but it's a classic, which does mean it is lower quality and it's also a little bit more affordable. Location wise, it's not really walkable into Paihia. You are really out of the way. So I haven't stayed at it, but I'm not planning on staying at it, but very much as a site to stay, to spend a few days if you don't want to leave the site and just be playing on the water and being within the same campsite, providing you've got small setup. It's a good campsite. There's a top 10 campsite in Whangerai. I haven't actually been and I'm not too sure where it is. So that one is one we need to go and check out. We live in Auckland, so when we head north, we often go to the Bay of Islands at Russell in one go. So we don't tend to stop halfway in Whangerai. But I didn't know about the top 10 in Whangerai. I think it's further in town, but I'll definitely check that one out. Across the coast on the west coast is the Kauri Coast top 10. This one is superior. And we have stayed a few times and it's lovely. It's on the river, on the bend for the river. So it's pretty cool to float around in inflatables on a lovely hot day around the area. Also, it's got eels. So at night time, you can take a torch and the eels will come up to the torch and you can see them swimming away. A bit freaky, but really cool. Facilities are pretty good. The only downside, it is in the middle of nowhere. You have to drive to get everywhere. There's also no phone signal, but they've done really good Wi-Fi because they know there's no phone signal. So if you want to get away and spend some time, it's fantastic. It's about half an hour away from the Whatuwhiwhi Lakes, which is absolutely beautiful and a wonderful day trip to go to. Heading further down into Auckland, there are 2 in Auckland, one North Auckland Red Beach and one further south, which is Orere Point. I've not been to either. I know the Red Beach one, it is fairly local to me, almost too local that it's not worth staying at. But Red Beach is absolutely gorgeous, a fantastic beach and a wonderful area with lots of amenities, so I highly recommend that one. I don't know the Orere Point one. That's South Auckland. It's a classic, so I don't know how big it is, and it's one that we might check out as well in the future. Heading across to the Coromandel, hot water beach. This map is classed as premium, but I know recently they got a heated swimming pool, which is fantastic, which is now a superior. Absolutely fantastic campsite. I've done a whole video about hot water beach here, and I can highly recommend the Hot Water Beach Top 10 campsite. Great location to the beach for digging your hot pool in the geothermal beach. Heading up the Coromandel Peninsula, there were 2 top 10 campsites in Coromandel town, Shelley Beach and Coromandel. I noticed in my research for this video that the Coromandel one has now been bought by Tasman Holiday Parks. We stayed in the Coromandel one many years ago before children, and it had a really good location to town, which was great. So I can recommend it, but it's not under the top 10 branding anymore. The Shelley Beach Road one I've not been to, but it's a bit further out of town and has a really good access to the beach, and I've heard really good things about it. Heading further now into the main area of the Central Plateau, out towards Tauranga and Whakatane. We haven't stayed at the Tauranga one, but we're looking forward to going to the Ohope one at the end of this year. It is so popular, and it's been voted the best beach top 10 campsite in New Zealand many years in a row. We had to book 1 year in advance to go on a public holiday weekend, so we'll be going in October this year. They have a heated swimming pool, they have slide, and they're also very close to the beach. So look out for that video because we've got that trip booked. Into central North Island and over to the east coast is Gisborne. We haven't even been to Gisborne. It's the only place we haven't been to in New Zealand. It's quite a way out over on the east coast and quite rural, so it's somewhere we're hoping to go to on a trip very soon. Into the central North Island you have Cambridge. Cambridge is a classic top 10 campsite which we stay at when we go to the caravan show. I've got a video here of when we visited the caravan show, and we stayed at the Cambridge top 10. It is a classic, it is very basic, it has everything you'd need, and the location is very much in the middle of town, which is great. It's next to the main domain. Good amount of space on this site for our big caravan, a very small playground and a jumping pillow, but not much else. Heading over to Waitomo. Waitomo is definitely worth a visit on your trip to New Zealand, and there isn't many accommodation options, particularly for camping in that area. So the Waitomo top 10 campsite. It is a superior. We stayed quite a few years ago, but it does have a swimming pool and it's quite a large site. It is well worth it for its central location, and you can walk to the few bars and restaurants that are in the area, as well as access to the tourist areas. Heading over to Rotorua. We love Rotorua. I have many videos, including a complete playlist just for Rotorua. We don't actually stay at the top 10 campsite in Rotorua because it is on the lake, so it's not actually in town. There isn't a top 10 campsite in the town of Rotorua, but there are a lot of campsites to choose from. We love the dinosaur park, which you can see in this video, but it very much depends what you want from a campsite in Rotorua. The top 10 Blue Lake campsite is wonderful. It's on the shores of the Blue Lake, but you're only going there if you want to play in the lake and access to the lake. You will need to drive to get into Rotorua for the mountain biking, for the geothermal, and for Rotorua town. So it depends what you want from your holiday. An hour south of Rotorua is Taupō. Taupō is also a geothermal site. Check out my video from a couple of weeks ago where I talk about free geothermal around New Zealand, and there's some free sites you can go to in both Rotorua and Taupō. The Taupō top 10 I stayed at quite a few years ago. We popped in when we went last month. We actually stayed at the Lake Taupō Holiday Resort. The top 10 Taupō site is round the corner. It is quite a way out of town, so it isn't walkable to any of the Taupō amenities. I've noticed in the research for this video it's now classed as superior, so I do wonder if they've upgraded their facilities. We didn't go in, we just checked it was still there. We thought it was fairly basic when we stayed, but maybe they've had some upgrades. I have to admit, if I'm in Taupō, I would stay at one of the 2 water parks, which is De Bret's or at the Lake Taupō Holiday Resort, as we highly enjoyed those sites and it's more suitable for our children. But if you are just looking for somewhere to stay, I always recommend the top 10 franchise anyway. A little bit further south from Taupō, at the bottom of the Lake Taupō, is Moutere Bay top 10 site. This is a classic, so it is quite basic. We haven't stayed here, but we did stay at a campsite a few miles down the road. What we noticed about the Moutere Bay campsite, and we did call in recently when we were on our holiday to Taupō, it's split across two sides of the road. So you do have facilities on both sides, toilets, camping facilities, but the main reception is on one side, the lake is on the other side, and I have real concern as to the safety of crossing that road. It's a 60km/h road, so it's not too bad, but it is the main state highway in New Zealand, State Highway 1. But I'm sure it's wonderful. Lake Taupō is a beautiful lake, and you would have a fantastic time camping on the shores of Lake Taupō at Moutere Bay. On the left-hand side of the North Island is New Plymouth. New Plymouth we stayed at on one of our road trips just before we had children. I was very pregnant with our first child, and it is an in-town campsite. We didn't have our big caravan. We had a little van at the time, and thank goodness we did, because it was a very cramped campsite. We did stay at the height of the season. It was early January, so it was fully booked. We managed to get ourselves a slot because I'd booked it on our drive home. But it was tight, it was full. Good location for amenities within New Plymouth, and a gorgeous, stunning view of Mount Taranaki. Back to the central North Island is Ohakune. Ohakune is the access to the Tongariro National Park and the mountains. Really good location in Ohakune town, and you can walk to the restaurants, and you're not far of a drive up to the mountains. You've got both Whakapapa ski field, which we recently went to, and you can see in this video, as well as the other side of the ski field for Mount Ruapehu, so it depends how early in the season you are and when you want to visit. But it's really good access for winter in New Zealand. Back to the east coast of the North Island, there is Napier and Hastings. We visited Napier many years ago again, similar road trip before children. The Napier top 10 is just outside of town. So again, it's not a great location for Napier town, but there aren't many campsites in Napier town. So we stayed at the top 10 and we could drive into town. It was 5 minutes away. It is on the beach, which is again gorgeous on the east coast, beautiful sunrises over that way. There's the Hastings top 10, which we haven't stayed at, but we're planning on our road trip later this year as we work our way down the country and we go to the longest place name in New Zealand and another big water park. Are you seeing a theme in our travels? At the bottom of the North Island is New Zealand's capital, Wellington. There are 4 top 10 campsites in this area, and I confess I've only visited one of the 4. I haven't been to any on the Kapiti Coast or in Martinborough. They look great. I just haven't visited them in that area when we've explored. We have, however, stayed at the Wellington one. The Wellington one is good for overnighting before you get to the Inter-Islander, and unfortunately that is what it's used for. So you'll have 1 to 2 night stays and not longer stays, and it is a classic. So being a classic, it's got everything you need, but I wouldn't recommend a longer stay. We've had trouble with the big caravan, again being 9 meters, and it being quite a tight, small campsite to get our caravan in. So in recent years, we haven't actually stayed there for overnighting, and we've stayed at a NZMCA, a New Zealand Motor Caravan Association site, near to the ferry terminal, just for our overnight crossing. Now, crossing over the Cook Strait on the Inter-Islander using your discount, we arrive on the South Island, or Te Waipunamu, as referred to by Maoris in Te Reo Māori. We've explored this extensively on multiple road trips around New Zealand, with another trip planned for later this year. Looking forward to that in the summer. Recently, top 10 franchise have lost a few campsites to Tasman Holiday Park, and there was one at Picton. Picton is where the ferry comes in, which is here. And that's now owned by Tasman Holiday Parks. It's lovely, still a lovely site. So whilst it's not under the top 10 franchise and there isn't a top 10 site in Picton, I can recommend the Picton Tasman Holiday Park, previously top 10, as somewhere to stay. Over on the left-hand side, Abel Tasman and Nelson Way, there is the Golden Bay top 10, which I haven't stayed at and is somewhere worth looking. However, the Motueka one, which is the gateway to Abel Tasman, is absolutely stunning. 2 years ago, we stayed there for Christmas in our caravan and we spent 10 days there. The entrance to the Abel Tasman National Park, they had a swimming pool, they have wonderful facilities, and even Santa came on the back of a pickup truck on Christmas Day. I can highly recommend the Motueka Top 10 campsite. Travelling down State Highway 1 on the east coast is the Kaikoura site. Kaikoura is a wonderful place for watching the whales and the dolphins, and a good place to base yourself. I haven't stayed at the Top 10 site there. At least I don't think I have, but Daddy said we had many years ago. I can't remember. There's quite a few places to stay, and I'm sure it was wonderful, but it's also a good place to stop on your road trip from Picton down to Christchurch. Heading inland is the Hamner Springs Top 10. Hamner Springs is a wonderful geothermal area, and it's somewhere we're going on our road trip at the end of this year. There's a big water park there, all geothermally heated, which they've recently upgraded the children's section with water slides. The Hamner Springs Top 10 campsite is a superior, and it's very likely they have a geothermal heated pool, and we're looking forward to staying there later this year. Heading over to the west coast is Westport and Greymouth. I haven't stayed at either of those. These are good places for exploring the west coast, but we did spend quite a lot of time at the Fox Glacier Top 10. Unintentionally, we got stuck there a few years ago with rain and storms and never actually made it up the glacier. We based ourselves at the campsite. It was a good base. You did have to drive to get to places, but there were a few restaurants and things which you could get to by walking. But generally for the glacier and the other accesses you'll need to drive. It's quite a rural area anyway, and it does get some considerable strong winds and bad weather, which is nothing anyone can do anything about. Heading over to Christchurch, we haven't stayed at any of these because we have family and we stay locally in Christchurch, even in the caravan, but I can highly recommend going over to Akaroa. Akaroa is a lovely little area, and I've heard the Top 10 is really nice. It's a good location to the town, worth exploring, with a really cool place called the Giant's House. Check it out. Now, heading inland as we road trip towards Queenstown. Geraldine. Geraldine is a lovely Top 10. It's actually a classic, but I felt the facilities were next level. I'm surprised it's not been given premium status. Lovely place to stop, lovely little town. So if you want to break up your road trip, stop at Geraldine Top 10 campsite. Another one is Timaru. It's another one where Daddy says we've stayed there, but I can't remember. On your road trip following the east coast of the South Island is a Top 10 there. Heading to Oamaru, which has some funky stuff there around the steampunk. Somewhere I've not stayed, but it's definitely somewhere I've stopped, and I can recommend stopping there too. But not to be confused with Omarama, which is further inland, and if you're looking at the map, it's very confusing. We haven't stayed there, but we have stopped there on our road trip. Again, these are good stops as you're road tripping around the central South Island and working your way down to Queenstown. Which brings us to the Queenstown Top 10. Queenstown Top 10 is a good location out the back of the city. It's very rare to find a campsite within a city, but it's a good location as it's nestled at the back with a stunning view, but also walkable to everything you need within the city centre. It's another one where you could park your car, leave your caravan and not get back into your car for a few days. You could walk to the restaurants, all your facilities, you can jump on buses to go to the excursions, and you can really base yourself in Queenstown. This one's won quite a few awards at being a good campsite and a good base, so I can highly recommend the Queenstown Top 10 campsite. And finally, if you're going to Milford Sound, head to the Tianau Top 10 campsite. Breaking up your journey between Queenstown and Milford Sound, you could drive from Queenstown to Milford Sound, coming back and staying at Tianau. It's a long drive. If you wanted to go to Queenstown to Milford Sound and back in one day, you would easily spend 8 or 9 hours in the car. So basing yourself at Tianau means you get to see the beautiful drive, you're not in a rush, and you can see the wonderful waterfalls and everything that's there. Thank you for watching. We're a big fan of the Top 10 campsites, and I like the reliability and the consistency around the country. You also get points for staying at them if you're a member. We are now gold class members, and the discounts get bigger as you get higher up in the membership, which is fantastic. They aren't the cheapest. It's not a cheap night for a campsite. You are paying for a piece of grass, but also they're not the most expensive as well. So if you're looking for consistency, particularly if you've got a small family and you know what amenities you need, and maybe a big caravan, so you need space to get them in, check out the Top 10 campsites. I post every Friday, 6 AM New Zealand time, so hit subscribe so you can see the latest updates. You can see when we stayed at these campsites and the trips that we've got coming up, as well as check out my back catalogue of the trips that we've been on and places that we've been to around New Zealand with our little family. So I'll see you in my next video.